Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mount Mindset. I'm your host, Gio McNee, and in this week's episode, I'm wanting to talk about suffering. As you know, if you've followed this podcast, I am big on mindset. And one of the things that we see in today's day and age is lots of people talking the talk, but not walking the walk. And this weekend, I took on a challenge. And this challenge was one of my bigger challenges. It was something I've never done or completed anything of this time or distance before. So it was a big, big task. And I want to explain what I went through over the course of a rather long day on the bike. So if any of you are following me on Instagram, you'll see I completed a 338 kilometre bike ride in just under 11 hours. I would kindly... was allowed to tag on with the guys from Livingston Cycling Club. They do an event where they take part in an event called Ride to the Sun. And in this event, what it happens each year is at the summer solstice, which is the longest day and the shortest night, there is a bike ride where you ride from sunset all the way through the night and try and get to Edinburgh by sunrise. So you set off in Carlisle, which is in England, and you want to arrive in the capital of Scotland, Edinburgh, by the sunrise. So it's called Ride to the Sun, a great event that I've taken part in 4 times before this weekend. But the guys from Livingston Cycling Club and another few clubs, but the one that I took part in was the Livingston Club, is they actually ride all the way down and then ride all the way back. So it's over double the distance. Now, one of the things that I'll make clear is that every single time that I've took part in the Carlisle to Edinburgh leg, I have bonked. Now, bonk is a term used in cycling for you, similar to marathon runners where you hit the wall, you just run completely out of energy. I've never quite figured out why it was the case. Maybe it was fueling, maybe it was hydration, maybe it was because I'm riding through the night. I just could never work it out. So being the type of guy that I am, I decided the best way to figure this out was to do double the distance. So I want to go into the story about what took place. Now, I'm going to tell you the story about suffering, and there'll be some references to cycling, and I'll keep it for the non-cyclists. I'll just explain why certain parts of this are important, because it'll play out later on in the story. If you ever watch the cycling on the TV, you'll see these guys riding in a big bunch. And the reason they ride in a big bunch, the name for that's a peloton, so they ride in a group together. And the idea is that the guys at the front will push the air out of the way, and the guys behind can get a little bit of reprieve or recovery as the guys at the front are doing more work. And the idea is that each take turns pushing into the wind, and then you rotate through. And the whole idea is that you work as a bunch, as a well-oiled machine. It's a rather interesting thing about cycling is you can ride with guys from all different parts of the world in different locations, and you fall straight into this well-oiled machine. And the guys from the Livingston Cycling Club were incredible. I mean, you can see they're well represented, they're well regarded locally as a cycling club, and as a group of guys, absolutely excellent. Couldn't have asked for better guys to take part in this event with. Just in terms of how they operated, how welcoming they made you, and how efficiently they worked. There were, some great powerhouses in there that really came to the fore later on in the ride. But interestingly, the story starts before we took part in the ride. So we arranged to meet in the car park, which is next to the end of the ride in Edinburgh in Cramond. So there's a car park there, and we thought, right, rather than in the middle of the night end up having to ride back to Livingston, the start point, which we would have needed to pick up our vehicles, we'll drive to Edinburgh and then ride to Livingston, which was where we started. So we would leave our van, or I left my van in Cramond car park, and I noticed there I wanted to get there early because it was like, well, we don't want to arrive, late or being tight for time. So it was myself and 2 of my friends, Steve and Simon. We get there early. The planned time to leave Cramond was 10:30 to arrive in Livingston for 11:30. I personally thought that was a little bit tight, to get from Edinburgh to Livingston in an hour. But the guys know the area better than I do, and they were like, yeah, that's fine. So thought, well, okay, and if we're riding in a bunch, then should be no problem. So I arrived there about 10:15, plenty of time to get changed, get into your kit ready, double check everything, and it just gives you enough breathing time. And I noticed that, Steve and Simon were there, but there was no one else from the cycling club. So I dropped a message into the chat. I'm like, is anyone coming here? Nothing. So I thought, that's interesting. At this point, I realised that we've not got the route. So I know the area well enough to get from where we were to Livingston, but I thought, the timing was going to be a bit tricky. So there was another guy that arrived from the Livingston Cycling Club, and he says, are you doing the event? I says, yeah. He's like, yeah, great, I'm leaving my car here. So I thought, that's great. He'll have the route, he'll know the way, we won't be tight for time. So it's 10:30, he's faffing about in his car, and I'm like, right, come on, we need to get going. I'm impatiently waiting. But in the back of my mind thinking, he knows the quickest route, we'll get there in plenty of time. So I said, as we set off, I'm like, have you got the route? He's like, no, I don't know the way. So and immediately before we've even started this event, we're an hour out. I don't think we're going to make it in an hour to the start line, and we've got this huge ride in front of us. So that was how it started. So I says, look, here's the plan. I'm going to go this route. You guys sit in my wheel, and I'm going to gun it all the way to Livingston. Meaning that I'm going to punch the hole in the wind and ride nice and hard, and you guys hold on. Fortunately enough, one of my friends, Simon, very, very strong cyclist, and he was very up for sharing the workload, but had the same thought process as me that we did not want to miss the start. So that set us off before we'd even started the ride. We're under pressure and needing to ride harder than we would like to ride for the rest of the day. And that will come into play later on. So remember, we were thinking that it was going to be a much easier pace than the pace that we're setting heading to Livingston. So we're charging along. I don't even know where the industrial estate is or where this start line is. I know the area, but I don't know which part of the area that this cycle shop is in. So we meet at Scott Cycles. I'm checking my phone while riding at 24 miles an hour, looking for the location. Meanwhile, trying to keep the group of guys together. And one of the pace was red hot, and it was not what you were, just really the opposite of what you wanted to do. So one of the guys is toiling at the pace. We're easing off, but still trying to get there quickly. It's better if we all stick together because, as I said, remember, we're trying to push the wind out the way. So it would be great if we can all handle together. And my thinking was, it'd be much easier pace when we get there. So let's just get there and we can get rolling. So eventually find the place, roll into the cycle shop, and I go in and say, look, do you sell any of the small sachets? So there's small sachets of essentially like an anti-chaffing cream. So if you imagine that you're cycling, you've got shorts that have a pad in them, and the idea is this pad will reduce the pain of riding on a pretty solid saddle. And there's cream that you can put on that just helps stop the heat spots build up. So the cream lasts a certain amount of time, and knowing that we're going to go for a big day riding 210 miles, that cream's not going to last the whole day. So I'll put a couple of sachets in the jersey and I can use them throughout the ride. So pops into the shop, sets off, and we start riding out, and we're chit-chatting to the guys, and I think there was 18 of us started. So 18 of us started the ride leaving from Livingston. And I noticed, first of all, the pace. I thought, they took off a little hot. Thinking, hey, look, guys are excited, very, big ride, big day out, probably G'd up, they'll settle in. That was my first mistake. So as I'm chatting to the guys, they're shouting to the guys in the front to ease off the pace, and it's just wicked fast. And I'm thinking to myself, you'd be happy to ride 50 kilometres at this pace. Never mind nearly 350 kilometres. I mean, surely this can't be the pace that they're going to be riding at. Because the idea was, it's a long day, we'll go slower because it's a long day. will conserve a bit of energy. Well, the Livingston Cycling Club had very, very different ideas about the pace, and they were charging on. That then starts to get a little bit of the doubts in the mind where you're thinking, wait, now have I brought enough fuel? Because one of the things you need to plan when you plan out a big cycle is how do you fuel getting 11 hours on the bike? Like how many calories will you need? How would you digest the calories? Is it a mixture of gels, or are you going for gels and drinks? So there's carb mixtures that you can pour into your bottle and you can drink away, and that will help keep you fueled. But inevitably, it doesn't matter how much energy you try and put in, you're definitely going to burn way more energy. And to give you an example, I burnt 9,000 calories over the 11 hours and only managed to get 3,500 calories in, so a huge deficit. So getting your fueling strategy is really, really important. The other thing was, it was very, very muggy. So the day was, in typical Scottish fashion, very, very changeable weather. So we set off in the sunshine. We started off in Edinburgh and it was overcast, cloudy, and looked like it was going to rain, and it was quite cool. Then it moved to sunshine, and you're thinking, I probably need to put sun cream on. Then it went to pissing it down. So the heavens opened up. Then there was thunder. Then the rain went off. Then it went but to sunny. Then it went to hot. So every variation of temperature, and one of the things that you need to do when you're doing this is you need to keep on top of your hydration, because you can deal with the heat as long as you're keeping hydrated. So as I was going through the ride, I'm putting electrolyte tablets into the water, and then a carb mix in the other bottle so I can keep sipping away. So the whole idea is, look, you need to, you got a long day. The last thing you want to do is run out of fuel. And remember, I was doing 80 miles and running out of fuel and bonking, never mind 210. So that was in the back of my mind, but things were going well. One of the guys that we started with, unfortunately, he blew his doors off, which is the technical term for you've just not got it that day. You had the willpower, but unfortunately didn't have the legs. So he pulls off the ride and starts to make his way home. The interesting thing was, I didn't know how he was going to get into his house, because his bag that had his keys was in my van, which was in Edinburgh, and he's heading back to his house with no keys. So luckily enough, he got his spare key from his daughter. But that was our first casualty, and we were only 30 miles into the ride. So the pace had taken its first toll. And again, my expectations was we were going to be going a lot slower than this. So mentally, you can imagine the mindset starting to kick in, because you're starting to calculate, right, I've got the fueling for this particular pace for this particular duration. If the pace goes up, you're now like, well, how am I going to fuel this one out? Because you're going to be sweating more, so you're going to need more fluid, and you're going to be burning more energy, so you're going to need more fuel. But I'd brought the fuel for the pace that I'd thought, and I'm thinking to myself, right, this is going to be a day where we need to manage this effort quite tactically. But the pace was good, and remember, as you move in a group, the group are doing the work. So you can go much quicker in this big group than you could if you were doing it yourself. So the idea was, look, you can do some work in the front, get to the back, get the break that you need, and hopefully conserve the energy. But even at that, it was like, still going to be touch and go. And then when we had got 50 miles into the ride, our second casualty had taken place, where one of the guys just didn't have it. He just mentally cracked it. Just, thinking about a long day ahead, the weather's changing, you've never ridden that far, the pace is high, and you just go, look, I'm checking out. And that's what he did. He went home for the train. And it just shows that, this guy is one of the most naturally gifted cyclists that I've ever seen. And he cracked, mentally cracked. He physically didn't crack, he mentally cracked, which was, he just mentally checked out. He was like, no, and the inner bitch got the better of him. And you've heard me talk about the inner bitch, because the inner bitch will start to serve up excuses. So those excuses are like, yeah, what are you doing this for? You could be home, you're not feeling right, this isn't the right time. All these excuses can start to play in. And when that inner bitch starts, it's very, very, very difficult stop that internal chatter. And, you know, it cracked arguably one of the most naturally gifted cyclists that I've ever seen. You know, physically he was there, legs were fine, no rocking and rolling, and he just jumped on the train home, and that was 50 miles in. So it just goes to show that even the best can crack. So we've got a few victims. The pace is red hot, but the guys are doing work. This club is, and I mean, under no uncertain circumstances, this club was bomb-proof in terms of keeping the group together, responding well to the shouts. If anybody got a mechanical problem, they were stopping. You know, they were keeping the pace high, but keeping the group together. And they would ease off the pace if the guys were falling off. So, I mean, a really, really well-oiled machine, but just much, much faster than what I'd expected. And not what you want to do when you're doing nearly twice the distance that I'd ever ridden before. So it set the scene for a red hot pace, and the guys started to shift on really well. And on the way down, the difference with the way down is I didn't know the way down because I'd never ridden that course, but I certainly knew the road on the way back up. So we make our way to Carlisle. We get to Carlisle. We're in England. I've rode at this point 120 miles. The guys had rode 105 from Livingston. So, I mean, a really solid, superb day out. If you're like, one of the big milestones that you want to achieve when you start cycling, or when you can be a good cyclist at this point, is you want to get to the Imperial Century, which is you want to get to 100 miles. So the metric one's 100k, great achievement in itself, and then the Imperial one is 100 miles, which is a very, very big day out, and it would usually take between 6 and 8 hours, depending on, you know, if you were starting out. And I think we'd done 120 miles in 5 hours and 30 minutes. So the pace was red hot. We get to Carlisle, the sun's out, it's getting much warmer. So we got to Carlisle, all I wanted was water. That's all I could think about was, I just want plain water. Because the thing with this fuel is that you're drinking these syrupy carb mixes and you're drinking electrolytes, and it's great and it's doing its job, but like after a while it can be tough to get them down. And it's a bit like when you were a kid and you're like, you know, I'm not wanting any more of that. But you know that if you want this body and machine to operate properly, you need to keep fueling it and keep getting it in. So as a means to an end, you're keeping that fueling going. And I remember thinking to myself, right, I feel pretty good. Get something to eat at the restaurant, has a shawarma wrap, a few cans of juice, tops up the water bottles, gets plenty of water in, plenty of salt in the food, and thinking, right, ready for the next part. And as we get ready in the group, G up, we set off. That's when things started to change, because it dawned on me that I'm now 120 miles deep, and I need to ride all the way back on a route that I have found difficult in the past, just doing one way, never mind both ways. But you know, optimism was high, but the pace was even higher than on the way down. And it was all right up until about 130 miles in. So once I got to 130 miles in, the course is sort of like undulating, meaning it's got little tiny risers and it flattens off and then it goes down and then rises up. And to stay in the bunch, what you need to do is, like, the guys are riding, pushing the wind out the way. So imagine that one rider's riding and pushing the air out the way of the other rider. So you need to stay within close proximity of the guy in front of you, and so does the guy behind you. And if you get any distance, then that wind resistance starts to creep in. So you start to get pushed further, and as you go further and further back, you're getting less and less of that benefit. So you need to make an effort to stay closer to the wheel in front of you, the guy in front of you. And what happens is that allows you to get the reprieve. And if you go on these little risers and the guys are riding hard and fast and the gap opens up, you need to put hard effort to get back on, to close the gap down. And it started to dawn on me. I'm thinking to myself, I've got 100 more miles or 90 more miles of this. I can't keep this pace. My legs are absolutely cooked with these efforts over and over and over and over again. And the expression that you use in cycling is burning matches. So imagine like you have a box of matches, and each time you do one of these hard efforts, you're lighting one of the matches. Well, you only have so many matches left. Now, this is when my internal chatter started, when my internal bitch rocked up and was, it was reporting what I was feeling in my legs. And it's like, how are you going to do this? Your legs are feeling the pain already. We've burnt all these matches already. We don't have an unlimited amount of matches. And this back half of the course, you're going to need to burn match after match after match after match. And you just don't have them. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, my backside's starting to get sore because the saddle is like, I'm now 8 hours deep into this ride. The natural contact point of the old buttocks on this saddle with this constant rubbing motion is now starting to take its toll. The shawarma wrap is now sitting in my stomach like a brick. I don't want to have any more gels. I feel like the inside of a syrup bag. I didn't want any more sugar. I didn't want to eat. I felt like, that feeling where you just feel like your digestive system's really slowed down. The last thing I wanted to do was put more gels and more carb mix and more electrolytes in, and I'm thinking to myself, and meanwhile we're riding at 22, 23, 24 miles an hour and the pace can't stop. You can't, it's woo, woo, woo. And I started to think to myself, right, how am I going to make this? And the inner bitch is now it was not me, like the positive me against the negative me. It was like it had a committee meeting, like, right, how are we going to get this done? Like that, what the status report is, things aren't looking good. This is looking really difficult. What are we going to do? And I remember thinking to myself, right, what's my options? Right, my options are, right, I've bonked on this ride before. So there's a good chance if I don't keep the fueling up, I'm going to bonk, because it's happened 4 times, the 4 times that I've done it. If I let go of this pace, I'm going to be out here for hours longer because I don't have the benefit of the guys. And I don't have the benefit of the big group. I need to ride solo myself. And I'm thinking, that sounds like, the last thing I want is to extend the amount of time I'm out here. So that didn't sound great either. And then the thought of having to keep on top of this fuel, that didn't sound great because I didn't feel like I wanted to eat. And then in the meanwhile, I'm thinking, right, what's my chances here? I've got like 90 miles to go. And I started to think, man, like, how are you going to do this? And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, at this point in time, you tend to start to not realise. You tend to think that it's easy to back out if it's just you. And I needed something bigger than this internal chatter to keep me pushing. And I remember thinking of my boys. I remember thinking, particularly, imagine going home to them and being like, Daddy gave up. Like, your dad gave up, boys. I cracked. And I remember thinking to myself, what kind of example is that? Like, and it's no harm or no shame to anybody if you go and you give it a go and you crack, fair enough. But, I hadn't cracked yet. And the internal chatter was talking about cracking. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go as hard as I can for as long as I can. And if I crack, then so be it. But I'm going to make the end of this ride if I need to ride it myself. If I need to be out here for longer than expected, then so be it. If I can't hang on to the group, then so be it. But I'm not going to crack. I'm not going to fold or get the train or, get someone to pick me up. I'm going to set out to do what I want, what I started to do. And I remember thinking to myself, when I get home, I want to say to my boys that I did it. I didn't quit, and it was hard and it was tricky and there was times where it was tough, and it was tough. I remember setting myself a milestone when I thought, right, I know that we stop at this town called Moffat, and it's on the way through. We tend to fill up the bottles of water. There's a garage here. You can go in and grab sort of like, a snack and juice. And I remember thinking, right, at least hang on to Moffat, because after Moffat, there's a 7-mile climb. And at this point, it's now dawning on me that I'm going to find it extremely difficult to ride the pace that this group can ride up that 7-mile climb. These guys are much lighter than me, and I need to put up a lot of power to keep up with them. So I had no idea how I was going to get over that climb. So I thought, well, just get to the garage. So that was another 20 miles of suffering get to the garage and fill up the water bottles. And by this point, if you followed my Instagram story, you'll see it. The status report was rough. The digestive system felt like it was blocked. I'd filled up the water bottles, I'd taken a drink of water, and I just was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. By this point, the backside was the colour of an orange traffic cone, or it certainly felt that way, just that raw, rubbed, sort of chaffed to bits sensation. And I put the chamois cream on, and I mean, it purely for moral, a morale boost, rather than I was getting any benefit, because at this point, the skin was rubbed raw. I don't know what it was doing, but the whole idea was that if I put some cream, it would take the feeling of sitting on a blowtorch away for a while. So I stuck the chamois cream on, got that on, and I thought, right, let's get thinking here, get your thinking cap on. And I started to think, I'm like, right, how could I do this? And I remember thinking to myself, right, you're in the shit, you're in the hole, right? That much is true. You know that you're up against it a bit. You're now at this point, you've ridden further than you've ever ridden, at a pace that's like a high pace that you'd be happy with for a quarter of this distance. You've got 3/4 of this route done by this point. You've got 60 miles to ride. You've got 60 miles left. Basically, the 2/3 of the course is done. You've only got a third left. You've one big climb, then a big descent, and then you can, a rolling terrain. You've rode this before. How could I do it? And this is the powerful thing that I want to illustrate to you, was the question was better. It was a better question. How can I do it? And I started to break it down. I was like, right, if I can get to the top of the climb, now in fairness to the guys, I didn't need to put myself under this pressure, because the guys said, look, we'll regroup at the top of the climb, meaning everybody can go at the pace that they can go to and they can stick in. Then the big dilemma. One of the guys says, there's a slower group going back, meaning that, hey, look, we're going to break off. Some of the guys were meeting their partners and their wives there, and they were going to take a slower route back. They're going to go the same route, but at a slower pace. They're like, if you're finding it too hot, then here's the get out of jail free card. You can ride in the group, and you can go slow, and you can go much slower. And hey, look, it was the exit, it was the offer of, hey, you don't need to ride this hard. And imagine how alluring that was. But being a boy that I am, I said I'd rather implode. Maybe not the best strategy, but it was a strategy that I had, where I thought, I'm going to find a way to hang on to this group. I don't know how long I'll last, but I'm going to give it a go. And then I set off from the garage and started up this climb. And I said to the guys, look, I'll get you to the top of the climb. I'm going to start off early to get a head start. And I thought, right, let me get to the top of the climb. When I get to the top of the climb, I started breaking down the route, because I knew the route on the way back, and I started to break it up into chunks. And I'm like, right, if I can get over this climb, that's 7 miles. If I can do the descent, that's another 7 miles. And then from there, I've got, the next part, and the next part, and the next part to get through. And I thought to myself, right, I can, let me just get to the next point and I'll reassess. And something happened. I started doing the climb, and I still felt pretty shit. But I'm looking down at my power meter, because in a bike, some of the bikes, you can get a piece of equipment that measures how hard you're hitting the pedal. It measures in watts how much power you're pushing through the pedals. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not doing bad numbers. I'm like, these numbers are really good, considering all things. Super high pace, changeable day, struggling with digestion. I'm 30 miles past my biggest ride, red hot pace with the group. And I'm thinking, these numbers are actually pretty good. I thought, right, come on, man, get to the top of the climb. Got to the top of the climb, and rather famously, there's a bagpiper playing at the top. So you get a real lift when you get to the top for two things. First, the climb's done, which is great in itself. And the second thing is that there's a bagpiper there. So if you're Scottish, there's no greater sound than a set of bagpipes, and you've achieved it. You've got to the top, so it feels good, and it felt like a little win, because by this point, The inner bitch is loud, but in fairness to the inner bitch, it was helping. It was like, look, how are you going to do this? It wasn't trying to beat me down. It was like, seriously, what are you going to do? So that was a switch where I thought, do you know what? This thing's playing to my favour. Started asking the better questions and then started to break down the course. And then also the offer of taking the slower option. And I just put myself to the sword. I was like, right, look, you've came this far. See how long you can hang on. And then the group thinned down. So there was, I think, 10 of us at this point, 10 or 11 of us. So some of the guys obviously broke off and met their partners, and some maybe went on the slower group, which in fairness to them, hat off to them. I have absolutely nothing but respect for the guys that go out and do that type of distance. And we got to the cyclo-rave, so at the other side of the descent, the cyclo-rave was there, which is, it's really weird. You ride in pitch black, we have the lights on the bike, you're riding in the middle of nowhere, like it looks in the countryside, and then pops out the blue as a hotel that's got lights and a disco and a rave. So it's a bit of a weird sight. You know, it's weird enough riding through the night in the middle of nowhere, but then for a pop-up disco to arrive there, you're like, oh, it's quite good. You can feel the buzz and the energy. I mean, I remember thinking to myself, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. So I'm 170 miles in by this point, and I've went really, really good, then really into the hole, then started to climb back out the hole. So we grab a couple of bananas, get to the toilet, fill up the water bottles, and then make a dash for Edinburgh. And there was a guy that, you know when things start to really bug you, and it's not that things are annoying you, but you can get irritated at particular things. And I remember feeling pretty irritated, and the guys that were out were just riding so well together and so strong, and I thought, hey man, we're going to make it. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to make it, man. These, like this, we can't come this far, and like me to let go at this point. And there was one of the guys that was there he was an absolute powerhouse. I mean, in fact, all of the guys that were there were pretty impressive. There was a guy that was an absolute powerhouse, and he was doing lots and lots of work in the front. even for a guy as strong as him, and he'd done the ride before, he got maybe 180 miles in, somebody's light had ran out, so they were exchanging the light over, and pulled into the side of the road, and he said that his backside was red raw, because he was 180 miles in at this point. And I remembered what I had in my jersey, and I grabbed the sachet, and I was like, here, I've got one, I've got a spare sachet. And the happiness that guy had in, his smile, the fact that he was getting a bit of relief. And I thought, that's the price that you pay. I mean, this is what I mean, is like, he's a crew, he's worked together, survived together. It was like that. This guy's done an incredible amount of work in the front. It was like, the least he can do is give him a bit of relief with a spare chamois cream. And that was it. We started smashing it, and we came riding into Edinburgh. And we got there, and I remember starting to think, I don't know what it was, like maybe it was just like the shawarma wrap had digested, and then like I kept pushing the gels in. So I had, to give you an idea of the amount of fuel that I had 11 energy gels, which have 30 grams of carbs in them. I had the Sturker sachets, I had 8 of those, which have 90 grams of carbs in them. And I had an entire tube of electrolytes, and I had, I think, 11 caffeine bullets that I had in my little bag, and some sports mix, so like pick and mix. And it was just a case of constantly putting that fuel in. And I think what had happened by sort of like 170, 180 miles in is the digestive system started to digest that shawarma wrap, and then the fuel that was sitting on top of that starting to work through my system, and I started to come back alive. And I remember thinking, the combination of, I'm actually starting to feel a bit better. And the longer this ride went on, I could feel it was like it was flushing through my body. I'm like, I'm alive again. I'm back. I'm back in the game. And and then that tied in with, right, I know that we're only 20 miles out. I can ride 20 miles. and I was starting to feel better, and I was like, right, keep on top of it, keep drinking the carb mix, keep drinking the electrolytes, get another gel in, and it was starting to, even though I was sore, and even though I was fatigued, and even though I was naturally tired, the feeling of coming back alive. And you know what was really powerful about it was I thought back to thinking about my kids, thinking about my boys, and going, you know what, you pushed through all those times where you could have stopped. That slower group is an option. You didn't crack. You didn't give in on the big climb. Even when you were in a dark place for 50 miles, you still pushed through. And they say that rock bottom's a trampoline. So you've got so much more to give, but you need to push through the mental battle. You need to push through the mind, because the mind's going to convince you that, hey, look, the mind's trying to take care of you. So when it's getting stress and fatigue and you worrying about you, it's like, it's going to try and say, look, you should stop. But you can get out of it. You can get out of the hole. And there is no better place to do it than with people that are doing the same thing as you. And this is what I mean about all the guys that were out there, whether you done the short ride, whether you done the long ride, whether you done the full ride, or whether you gave it a go. There is no better way to share that kind of experience than people that are doing the same with you. Because, you know, as a group, we started together and we finished together. And that feeling's incredibly satisfying, because there's an old expression that misery loves company, but so does success. And if you've got people that are there and you see it through and you make it to the end, there is no better feeling. So that was the story of my 210 mile bike ride, or 209.5, whatever it was. An average speed of 19.2 miles an hour, or in new money metric, that was 338 kilometres and just under 31 kilometres an hour average speed. So incredible day out. Big shout out to the Livingston Cycling Club. Awesome guys, awesome group, brilliant group to ride with. Wickedly fast, way faster than I thought it was going to be. And like just a really, really good, well represented. The riders are a credit to their club. They've put the work in, they put the effort in. So a big shout out to them. Big shout out to the fast guys that thrashed me up and down the country, literally. And for doing the hard efforts and pushing through, and just even the little words of encouragement, and helping do the work in the front. Big shout out to them. Massive respect to everything that they put together, and also for being as welcoming, because these guys had never met before. So incredible bunch, and massive respect to them. And if you want to take part in the Ride to the Sun, I would definitely give it the go. It's one of the events that I love taking part in every year. I bumped into some of the guys for the Johnson Wheelers down there. Mark kindly reminded me, he says it's never a bike ride I don't see you on. So shout out to Mark and all the guys for the Johnson Wheelers. But the overall point that I would make is that no matter how hard it gets, you can always see it through. And if you are struggling, find something that's bigger than you. Find if you've got something or someone that you want to make proud, think of them and think it would be like when you can get to the end of something or get through something and you can say, I did it. Because that feeling is immeasurable. You can't buy that feeling. It's a feeling that you can only earn. There's lots of things in life that you can buy, but you need to earn those feelings, and you get to keep them for life. So push through the struggle. If it's hard, dig in, stick in there, and you've always got more to give. And sometimes you've got to be a little bit bonkers. Look at what I did. I should have never logically thought of a ride that I struggled to get to the end of feeling great and wanted to double the distance, but showed up, made it happen, and look at what's possible. But I didn't do it without, it all being positive and light. Big dark hole for 50 miles. And if you, no matter what dark hole you face, think about how do you get through it. Ask yourself better questions and you'll get there. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Mount Mindset. I've got a visualization course. If you're struggling to visualize, go check it out. It's step by step what you need to do to build the future that you want. If you want to find a way to unlock the power that's been in you, you've used these techniques your whole life. And just like any great thing, maybe have forgotten about them. Maybe you need a gentle reminder. Maybe there's a few techniques that are new to you that you'd like to use. Go check them out. Go live the life of your dreams. Make it happen. Ask better questions. Hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one.